Actually, no, that was just a reflex answer. Once they got the head,
Two-minute warning. TikTok. I'm going to start naming names. Good to see that the respect attributed to the person at the front. Thank you, Barb. As always, we start today by acknowledging the traditional owners of this land, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and we certainly thank them for their ongoing and past stewardship of the land that we meet on. Welcome, everyone. And when I say welcome, everyone, I mean welcome, everyone. And we have the affirming statement, which basically says that we welcome people of all sorts of beliefs, all sorts of things, all sorts of sexuality. If that's the case, we are an open, caring community. Change. Who's had any change in their life ever? No one? Okay, I'll sit down. Today we've got this first individual 4 Gospels in one fireside chat from Brian. He gave us the overview yesterday. And Matthew is first up, correct?
yes.
Is Matthew the good... I should have said Mark. No. And then Julie's going to lead communion a bit later. And this is... Oh, it goes that way. Change is part of our lives, but do we like it? Are we different people from 5, 10, 20 years ago in our attitudes? How do we view change then? And how do we view that change now? What change has given you life? What change has sucked the life from you? I want you to contemplate that, and while you contemplate that, because you're people who can do 2 things at once, Carolyn is going to come up and light the Christ candle, and I am going to read a poem by Rumi. This being human is a guest house. Every morning is a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. even if they're a crowd of sorrows, who violently sweep your house empty of your furniture. Still treat each guest honourably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Today we're going to talk about change a little bit, but we're going to talk about embracing change. So, the first thing I always do when I'm leading is I consult Gary Larson about change. And Gary says this: there's Pinocchio amongst a pride of lions. Whilst vacationing in Africa, Pinocchio had his long-time wish to be a real boy unexpectedly granted. That change was a bit awkward. Change can be imposed upon you, sweeping you along. I pondered my life and what had been the biggest changes, and mostly I was thinking of technology. Who remembers that? The first computer. Didn't we think we were smart and clever? First home computer, that's right, Barb. I remember when I first started, the computer room had the big real things that used to go across, amazing. So we went from that to the very convenient laptop. We went from that to the mobile phone. Now that's my first mobile phone. It was an NEC and it was a brick. I used to put it in my seat pocket and I'd lean over. Having said that, it was a mark of success if you pull out the mobile phone. And guess what it did? It made telephone calls. Then something really changed. The World Wide Web. Who can remember that? Dial in. Who can make the noise that they used to have? Yeah, thank you, Brian. So technology has really changed our lives and by and large embraced it. But this is what I think is the biggest change in my life in technology. The ability for teenagers not to talk to each other. The mobile phone, the computing power that is now in our hands is mind-blowing. I was lucky enough when in the late 1980s, I went to the Kennedy Space Centre and it was fantastic. So they've got an Apollo rocket that was laid flat. And the tour guide told me, this is 1989, I think, he said, do you know in your car there was more computing power than on the Apollo rocket? Now imagine now what we'd say. What about change? Now this change we can't control. This has been imposed upon us. But what about change where you think you might have control? At 60, looking back, my changes probably have been fairly typical, but I'd have to say at the time they were no less daunting. So that's me, first day at work, going to get a job. Then I met a pretty sweet girl and we got married. Then we bought a house, fretting about being able to make the payments. Then we had 3 daughters, which was fantastic, mostly. I had to give my daughter away or walk her down the aisle, which was horrifying. I sort of retired so I can go on scary rides and had my first grandchild. Now, each of those I thought I had, well, apart from the grandchild, I thought I had a little bit of control about, but perhaps I was just delusional. I'm a numbers type of guy. So I'm thinking change. Is there a mathematical formula I can come up with? The ability to embrace change equals acceptance plus attitude plus adaptation, which is all well and good. What about change we don't want to embrace? Perhaps can't embrace. Who remembers Bozo the Clown? It was a toy that came out in the 1950s. Anyone? Yeah, who had one? I had one.
I used to sell ones.
So for anyone who hasn't, Bozo the Clown was an inflatable toy. My one seemed to be quite tall, but I was quite small, so I'm not sure how big it was. And Bozo had a lead weight in his feet. So you could whack Bozo on the nose and he'd go over, but then he'd just bounce back. So it was hours of entertainment with Bozo, knocking him down and seeing him float back. You'd punch him in the nose and he would rise from the canvas. I'm not sure it'd be an approved toy now. You could tackle him and he would rise back up. He was near undefeatable. We can feel the weight of expectation that we should be like Bozo. Spring back up regardless of change. If we don't, we can feel a sense of failure. Or everyone seems to encourage us. You've got to get back up off the canvas, embrace the change and move on. Bozo has limits, and so do we, regardless of what people think. Bozo can deflate. He can be helpless, not able to right himself, until someone comes along to help inflate him again. Some changes deflate us. We're overwhelmed. We imagine the new norm and we don't like it. We want to go back, but unfortunately we can't. Like Bozo, the path to accepting the most challenging change needs help, needs assistance, needs others. Somebody to help us inflate our lives again. Patience, listening, practical help, caring is required. We're going to have a song now, and the song is about expectation and the challenge of waiting. The surprise that can begin after that. Colin Hay wrote this song at a particular point of his life. Colin is a personal friend of Danny Wilson. You can ask about the story there. Colin Hay had it all. He was the leader of the biggest, most successful band in the world at that time, Men at Work. The band broke up and Colin's expectations were that success and adulation would just continue. The music industry and the public would continue to embrace and adore him just as they did before. Colin spent a period waiting, watching, expecting, doubting, distressing, challenging, delightful, and surprising. So this is a song he wrote at the time. I've just got to cue it up. So encouraging. The change he was expecting was not what he got. Whilst he watched and waited for his shift to come in, it was not what he expected. He had others helping him though, talking to him, talking about embracing the change that was unexpected and the journey that followed.
now. The ship is coming in. I'll keep checking the horizon, and I'll stand on the bow and feel the waves come crashing down, down, down on me. And you say, be still, my love. Open up your heart, let the light shine in. Don't you understand? I already have a plan. I'm waiting for my real life to begin. When I woke today, suddenly nothing happened. But in my dream, I slew the dragon and down the steep path, up this cobbled lane, walking in my own footsteps once again. And you say, just be here now, forget about the past, the mask is wearing thin. Just let me throw one more dice, I know that I can win. I'm waiting for my real life to begin. Any minute now, my ship is coming in. I'll keep checking the horizon, and I'll check my machine, sure to be that cold. It's gonna happen soon, soon, oh so very soon. It's just the times we leave. And you say, be still, my love. Open up your heart, let the light shine in. Don't you understand? Oh, I already have a plan. I'm waiting for my real life to begin. Hey, on a clear day, I can see by a long way. On a clear day, I can see.
Today I'm reading a poem by John O'Donoghue and it's called For a New Beginning. In out-of-the-way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you are ready to emerge. For a long time it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the grey promises that sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight, when your courage kindled and out you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure, hold nothing back, learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you.
As Judith was reading that, I was having flashbacks to dragging my kids to find John O'Donoghue's grave in the west of Ireland, and they were not very happy about that. Rosemary, sorry that Andy's sitting in your chair this morning. I did tell him that, and no, I didn't. And thank you for looking after this table, Bob. I always feel a bit sorry for this table. What's that? The cake was cheap there, yeah. I don't know why I feel such strong affection for an inanimate object, but there you go. Nice to see everyone. Last week we briefly looked at the four Gospels and their importance of the diversity inherent in having four stories and four portraits of Jesus. For those that weren't there, Mark's Gospel kind of gives us a low Christology, where it was inferred that no one is good but God, when Jesus is asked that, and kind of no resurrection appearances at the end of Mark's Gospel. But then we have John's Gospel with these kind of magnificent mystical reflections on the Word becoming flesh. And Trevor came up to me after the service last week and noted the similarity between my comments around prayer, where I mentioned that on the one hand, there's some of us who might not believe in God and can bring intentions into that space of prayer. But on the other hand, there's those that do believe that God can intervene. And there's a whole bunch of variations in between. And Trevor noted that the diversity around prayer in some ways can be mirrored in the diversity in how we see the Gospels too. So I thought that was a really interesting insight, Trevor, from last week. So we're going on a journey influenced by Alexander Shire's Quadratus, four movements, a movement of embracing change that we see in Matthew's Gospel, the reality of suffering in Mark's Gospel, joy in union with the sacred in John's Gospel, and then a commitment to service in Luke's Gospel. So I think I'll go just over 22 minutes today. I've timed this twice because there was so much stuff I wanted to cut and I couldn't quite cut it all. So we won't quite get to lunch, John, but it might be fractionally longer than normal. Sarah mentioned last week to me after the service as well that Shire was influenced by somebody called Joseph Campbell. I don't know if anybody's heard that name. A few people nodding. He was one of the kind of leading cultural and mythological scholars of last century. And he wrote the book, A Hero with a Thousand Faces. And in some ways, this Quadratus journal mirrors the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell speaks about and many people in indigenous societies go through as well. So that's interesting. So, but today, on the first part of our journey together, I want to explore the concept and experience of change that Andrew has so beautifully introduced today into this space. But just for 10 seconds, just sit with because I think Andrew captured beautifully some of the complexity of change, but just for yourself, when you hear the word change, what bubbles up for you? You don't have to respond, just in your own mind and heart. When you hear the word change, how do you feel about that word? Change is often touted as something that's super important. Are you open to change? It's often the question you get in a job interview. I don't know if you guys asked me that, I can't remember. Well, I want to be, pardon? We should have. Yeah, your questions were really tricky from memory. I want to be a change agent. Have you heard that kind of language? And the assertion that change is always good, and that tradition or traditions are bad, as they hold us back from the future. We're into progress because we're progressive Christians. And for me, at least, I think that's probably a bit of a false dichotomy. Every good political system probably needs a balance between traditional and progressive forces. Revolutions, although sometimes needed, can easily be a collapsing of that tension, right? So you can think of whether it's the left, if you look in history, or the right. The left often want to force change on society through violent means, or the right, which often tends to want to go back to kind of conservative values and perspectives. And democracy, I think, at best allows those tensions to play out in the political sphere. My conviction is that I think some things do need to be preserved, right? In fact, some things that have passed away need to be reactively engaged with. So forms of indigenous knowledge could be one of those things that need to be retrieved in light of the ecological crisis that we're currently undergoing. On the other hand, progress is sometimes needed, particularly when voices or views have been actively excluded and people have been abused. Think of the queer community and the advances that have taken place just in the last few decades. In fact, I had to get a visa for the UK now, which is really frustrating. I don't know if you guys know that you need to do that now for an Australian passport, which means I should have kept my British passport up to date. But anyway, but it asks this interesting question. It says, if you have been convicted of a crime, but excludes convictions based on laws involving homosexuality. And it kind of reminded me in that moment that we've all been able to see these massive shifts in our own lifetime. Again, things that Andrew noted, just technologically that we've been able to go through, but also sociologically and politically. So change is not an uncomplicated term. And it's certainly true that things are always changing. Scientifically, this is true, virtually every area of life. Although there are some atoms, although they're constantly shifting and rearranging into new forms, there are some that are so-called eternal, unless you split them, and then things go a bit nasty and nuclear, which is not always a good thing. But we talk about change, we talk about tree change, we talk about sea change, an active decision to do something different with our lives, a change that might be freely chosen. My ministry supervisor, about 6 or 8 weeks ago, stopped me at one point and he started laughing and he said, like, you're constantly working on yourself, Brian. You're so exhausting. I'm exhausted just listening to you. So I had a bit of a chuckle and went home and decided to change that, and which I kind of did, but time will not permit. And Tiggs makes fun of me a little bit too. About a week ago, we were having a fire, and she went out, and 2 hours later, she came back. She said, so tell me, how have you changed in the last 2 hours? And I'm like, yeah, smart ass. Sorry, shouldn't have said that. So we can choose change, But at other times, it's also that Andrew noted, change can be forced upon us. So we leave school. Miller's going through that journey now. We can lose a job. A partner leaves you. And in my case, and for some of us here, an illness, for me it was cancer, arrives in your life unbidden. And then sometimes we know we need to change something in our lives, but find it incredibly hard to do so. Maybe that's choosing and embracing retirement, or you stayed in a job too long. Maybe you need to change something about your relationship with people, with a difficult conversation. I hate difficult conversations. But most of us here know what it's like to experience these kinds of changes. Freely chosen or avoided, or change that comes unbidden or slowly arrived at. And then there's often the desperate desire to change. That beautiful song that Andrew played from Danny's Friend. I want to hear that story at some point, but anyway. Really want the record company to call me. My life has changed, but I actually want to change in a different direction. I want to go back to the way something was. And this kind of change is often painful for us because we often feel stuck, that there is nothing we can do to bring about the needed change in our lives or to stop the change that's happening to us. I think we can all relate to that. Then there's the subtle change that often takes time with one's spiritual, political, and ethical beliefs as those things shift in our lives. Small, subtle changes happen, things happen, and then years later you realize, oh my goodness, my views have really shifted. Does anybody relate to that kind of experience? You can't name any one specific thing, but a kind of a movement of moments of things happening in our lives brings about spiritual, religious, political, economic beliefs that shift. And even in my own life, again, Tiggs and I around the campfire talking like, gosh, we've really changed some of our views around our spirituality in the last 2 years. And what does that mean? For yourself, in your own life and your own journey, maybe if you want to close your eyes, you can do that. You don't have to. Again, I should stop having to say that. We all know how that works. But I'm going to ask 3 quick questions or 4 and see what kind of bubbles to the surface for you. Is there a change stirring in your life right now? Something beginning, ending, shifting, or asking for your attention? Might be big, small, obvious, or quiet. How are you experiencing that change in your body, in your heart, and your thoughts right now? Is there a longing, uncertainty, tension, resistance, curiosity? Are there parts of you that feel ready to move forward? And are there parts of you that are holding you back? What do you need to care for? Where do you need courage and patience? If you could take one small step, inward and outward, in response to change, what might that be? Is it a conversation, a letting go, a prayer, or simply naming the truth of where you are? I think it's fair to say that we don't live in calm times. At the moment, you think of just what's happened in the last 5 years, COVID, wars, ecological challenges, political upheavals. And Matthew's gospel was written in a time of enormous and tumultuous change as well. And it emerged on the end of a crisis, which was the collapse of the Second Temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD. You can't really understand what's going on with the Gospels or the historical Jesus If you don't know how big a deal the collapse of that temple was in 70 AD, better stick to my notes. I'm going to go really off tack here. But 66, big war, and Israel's obliterated by the Romans, and the temple is destroyed. And the Jewish people, particularly those in Jerusalem, had endured a trauma that was so profound that shattered not only their place of worship, but also the very center of their religious and cultural identity. Whew! That's cool. Did you hear that? No, just me. Just getting excited. The temple had been the most important aspect of their spiritual and political world. You couldn't separate the spiritual and the political in that context in the way we try to separate those things today. It was the place where heaven and earth met, and now it was rubble. And the Wailing Wall, if anybody's been there, is the only part of the temple that remains, and it was left there so the Roman centurions and the legions could have shelter for themselves. So when the temple fell, various structures, authorities, rituals that had defined Jewish life for centuries also collapsed in the process. And the community of Matthew is trying to make sense of what the hell just happened to them in their journey. So Matthew's community that he's writing to is likely in Antioch. It's a reasonable distance from Jerusalem. It's quite a multicultural city, but it became this refuge for many displaced Jews and the temple leaders who fled Jerusalem in light of the collapse. Among them were these Messianic Jews, which is where Matthew's gospel is particularly written to. And they're caught. They're actually a minority within a minority. They're caught between the broader Jewish population, who largely rejected claims around Jesus, but also this kind of growing Gentile movement of Christians that kind of have their own identity. And Matthew's community is caught in that space. So Shia kind of paints this community in Matthew as one of fragility that's been fractured, reeling from grief, cultural displacement, and spiritual uncertainty. They were not in the process of founding a new religion. They were simply trying to make sense of loss, trying to hold on to faith, and trying to understand what it means to follow Jesus when everything familiar had disappeared. So Matthew's gospel can be seen more like a survival kit or a manual for transformation in the midst of change. Not some distant future, but how to make sense of loss and change in the midst of life. So I think Matthew's message for the first readers that would have heard it would be asking them questions like, what happens when our familiar temples crumble? Whether institutions that we're part of, beliefs, relationships, and dreams. Matthew reminds us that that's not the end. Rather, we're on the threshold of change when that happens. Kind of a liminal space, if you're used to that language, where change can be birthed. So certainly the kind of change that was happening to Matthew's community wasn't something they wanted. And kind of like Colin Hay wished it could be the way it was before. But change begins with accepting our story. So one of the mathematical stuff that Andrew brought up there was acceptance, I think. But often we're invited into change. We're often invited to let go of our illusions, surrender our previous identities maybe, and to try and have courage in the midst of change. So Matthew's gospel opens with a genealogy. Has anybody ever read it? Anyone ever read Matthew's genealogy? 1, 2? Some good Christians, thank you. Just used to remind myself. Context. I used to be bored stiff when I read that genealogy. And in fact, in my more kind of evangelistic phase, whenever somebody became a Christian, I'd say, do not start with Matthew's gospel. Like, you won't even get through the genealogies. I thought they were irrelevant and boring. It's not a great opening moment and not a good way to win people over and 101. But it's actually far from boring, right? When you actually look at it, the genealogy is actually radically inclusive and symbolically quite rich. It includes 4 women, Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba. I know everybody knows Bathsheba. each of whose story is marked by scandal, foreignness, and suffering. Tamar poses a prostitute to ensure justice. Rahab, a Canaanite sex worker, offered refuge for Hebrew spies. Ruth, a Moabite, showed deep loyalty across tribal lines. Bathsheba, referred to as the wife of Uriah, endured a scandal of power and grief. These women are not just included in the genealogy, they're honored, which is very unexpected. Also list kings who failed, people from enemy nations outside Israel, and characters with deeply flawed pasts. It's a very, very, very messy story. And I think that's precisely the point. Jesus doesn't come from a perfect lineage either. He comes from a deeply human one. From the beginning, I think, Matthew tells us that transformation doesn't require perfection. Any Enneagram 1s in the house needing to hear that today, John? Change and transformation rather requires presence, humility, and the courage to begin again, the courage to begin, the courage to begin, echoing Tillich a little bit there, again and again and again. Anybody know the Goo Goo Dolls? Yes, okay. Love one of my favorite bands, Tiggs and I. I'm not going to sing, although I was about to. But the lead singer, John Resnick, speaks a lot about his battle with alcohol and overcoming it, and then having, failing and again and again. And it's a beautiful line in one of his songs. He says, "Every breath is a moment, and every moment is a chance to start again." And my journey with alcohol was a kind of bit like that, kind of often 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Change and transformation requires presence, humility, and courage to begin again and again and again. The genealogy also challenges purity codes, tribal boundaries, affirming that real change begins in real life. Shock horror. And that everyone has a place in the story of transformation, as that genealogy shows. So when we face change, no matter what kind of change we are going through, from the different dimensions of change we looked at earlier, we always start from where we are. We always start from where we are, not from where we wish to be, which is really hard. It's the horizon image, it's such a powerful image in that song. So by starting from where we are means, unfortunately, but fortunately, is that we start from our own wounds, our own histories, our awkward family trees. Anybody got awkward family trees? Found out the other day my great-great-great-grandfather was in the British Merchant Navy and died of syphilis in France. An interesting story. He's one of many in my family history that is curious. But our awkward family trees, they're not barriers to transformation. They're perhaps best seen as compost. And this is the place where our life can begin anew. Beautiful book called Inward by an Ecuadorian person called Yung Pueblo. If you get a chance to read it, it's a bunch of aphorisms. Found it particularly helpful. This is what he says about the space. It's not about rushing into our healing or becoming someone new as fast as you can. True transformation begins with radical honesty, with sitting in the presence of your current self without judgment. You do not need to be perfect to begin. You only need to be present. The moment you accept where you are is the moment you begin to gently shift. Real change doesn't come from self-hate. It grows from self-compassion. Self-compassion is something the church has not been particularly fantastic of speaking about. Often we often deal in shame and guilt. Change begins where we are right now by accepting, again, Andrew's mathematical formula, where we are, all of our imperfections, not some, all of them. And then something strange begins to bubble away within us. Matthew's gospel also shows Joseph having a dream, a divine whisper, a little nudge, asking him to say yes to something that makes no sense. You ever had that in your life? The context is Mary's pregnant, the path forward is uncertain, and yet Joseph is able to choose trust over fear. Again, that's often how real change begins, not with certainty, as much as we would love certainty, but with small, tiny little nudges and changes. A small whisper, an aha moment, another great band, a conversation with a friend, a book, a movie, a song, a moment that invites us to leave behind old understandings and risk something new. As mentioned earlier, it might be the loss of a job, the death of someone we love, the ending of a relationship, or it might be something quieter, a restlessness within us, an ache, a sense that our inner life no longer fits the outer story that we've been telling ourselves. I mentioned last week a set of questions. If you've done your homework, maybe you've sat with some of them. What is really going on with me? Who am I? How do I feel about my life really? These are the unsettling questions, and often the very questions that allow the whisperings to emerge from our true self within, or our soul, our spirit, or our unconscious, whatever language you feel comfortable with. What are you hearing today? Hearing the phone. What are you hearing today? Are you being whispered to? John's trying to make a joke, but anyway. Change also leads us into the wilderness. Jesus goes there after his baptism in Matthew. Jesus is tempted not just with bread and with power, but with illusions. The illusion that comfort is enough, the illusion that certainty will save us, and the illusion that being right makes us whole. I think we all know those temptations, at least I do, wanting comfort, wanting certainty, wanting to be right. They often show up in our lives when we want to fix things too quickly, like my kids, when we demand answers before we've listened to people. We often cling to certainty to avoid grief in our life. But Shia reminds us with Matthew that the wilderness is not punishment, rather it's a space or a liminal space where our illusions are stripped away so that we can discover something deeper, a truth about who we really are. The passion narrative, got about 4 or 5 minutes if you're wondering where I'm going into land. Every real transformation, and we're going to talk about this in a few weeks when we talk about Mark and suffering, but involves a kind of dying, a surrendering of old ways, a surrendering of old identities, a surrendering of old expectations. The passion narrative of Jesus is not just about suffering. It's a map of the human journey through change as well. Think of the followers of Jesus in the passion narrative. We also, like Jesus' followers, fall asleep. We betray ourselves. We run from pain. I run from pain. And yet we are invited again and again to wake up and not fall asleep. The word Buddha has this inherent sense of waking up. The word Buddha comes from the Sanskrit root of the word Bud, which means to awaken, to notice, to become aware. A general question for us, are we, are you, am I, sleepwalking through our lives? Are we betraying ourselves and our values? Change and transformation is about accepting where we are in our imperfections, as Pablo Jung reminds us, and acknowledging our fears, not running away from our fears. That requires the presence for change. The past and the future are bullies. They pour their tentacles into us every day, every moment. This future that we're dreaming of, the horizon, and the past is the same. The different parts of us that want to control and take away the beauty of the present moment for our lives, which is really the fertile soil. But we don't escape those fears by running away from them or pretending they're not there, but by accepting them. So how do we change with courage? How do we embrace change rather than resist it? One idea, you can sit with this one, and this is Shire's idea actually, that I've come to through a different angle, but he talks about creating a temenos in your life, which is basically a word for a sacred space, and this can be metaphorical or literal in your life, or both, but a place where you can come into the present, where you can listen, you can reflect, and you can stay anchored in the change and storm and transformation of your life. It's a place where you gather voices and stories, which is what we try to do on Sunday, through all the different things we do, that inspire us. It can be books, it can be mentors, prayers, poems. Stay close to what keeps your heart soft. Welcome not only the positive voices, but the other voices, the parts of us that we don't like, the parts of us that we try to silence. I didn't know Andrew was going to use the Rumi poem today, but I have it here. I popped it in this morning when I was going my talk again. I mean, I'm going to read it again. It's really worth just sitting and hearing the power of what Rumi's saying here. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Geez, we can be mean on ourselves. Some momentary awareness comes from an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Really? Even if they're a crowd of sorrows, you violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought. Anybody know the dark thought? Coming from the past, coming from the future, the shame, the malice. Meet them, sorry, I shouldn't be interpreting his poem. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Internal family systems, which is a psychological method, is big on this, welcoming the parts of ourselves and integrating them into our lives. When a person comes into our life who challenges us, learn to welcome the other, the opinions that you reject. Sometimes the voice that unsettles us is the very one that will carry us and invite us to change and to grow. Where our tormentors can become our mentors. Yep. The Gospel of Matthew doesn't promise change will be easy, but it insists that it will be meaningful. It also believes and affirms that transformation is possible, that every collapsing temple can be the beginning of something new in our lives. So maybe, just maybe, if we can stay open, if we can stay curious, if we can stay grounded, we can even find that in the rubble, like the temple, the sacred is already planning and planting something new. 2 questions as we close. You can close your eyes if you want. Echoes of questions I mentioned earlier. Is there something in your life right now, a loss, a shift, a whisper, or even a restlessness that might be inviting you to change? Might be subtle, loud, chosen, forced, joyful, painful. What's knocking on the door of your awareness and heart this morning? And then secondly, what part of you is struggling to accept where you are? What part of you is struggling to accept where you are? And what might happen if you soften towards that part with compassion rather than judgment? What might happen if you soften towards that part of you with compassion rather than judgment? This could be a place of fear, regret, exhaustion, resistance, but also the soil where something new could grow. And that's forced change on us with the lights. A blessing as we close. May you be blessed with honesty to see where you truly are, the tenderness to accept it, and the courage to begin again. May your wounds become your wisdom. Your losses become your thresholds, and your questions become your guides. And when the path feels unclear, which it mostly does, may you trust that even in the rubble, something sacred is already taking root. Amen.
Thanks, Brian. Let's pray together. Loving God, our world, your world is really struggling. We've seen intensified violence in the Middle East in recent weeks. And this on top of the deepening crisis in Gaza, Lebanon, Ukraine, Sudan, and beyond. These aren't isolated tragedies. They're symptoms of a world unravelling, struggling to uphold even the most basic principles of peace, accountability, and restraint. At a time when the need for a just, rules-based international order has never been clearer, is instead being undermined, and often by countries that Australia considers its allies. And it's also not lost on us that the majority of people leading these fights are men. When are we going to realise toxic masculinity involving the pursuit of power, fame, money, and Nobel Peace Awards is not able to navigate a better way? And of course, this toxicity is evident throughout Australia too. It just plays out in different ways. Help us, loving God, in our suffering and torment to not push away how we are feeling. It's crucial we acknowledge how we feel. And even though we cannot positively impact these big issues, we are still called to act, to be your arms and legs in our communities. Help us to never forget that and give us courage to be the people you have called us to be. People who seek justice and peace through your love for all people, absolutely everyone. And that is a massive ask, but there are no ifs or buts. We are to love everybody. Loving God, this morning we lift up the people in all our communities, family and friends, neighbours, workmates. We particularly think of those who are sick or hurting in any way. Give them peace and patience to face their situations. We think particularly of Gwen Vivian and ask for healing after her recent fall and time in hospital. Encourage us to care for and support her. And we pray for those on the margins of our community, the addicted, homeless, hungry, lonely, those with severe mental health challenges, those disengaged from their families, and those who are victims of family violence. It's a long list that keeps growing longer. Help us to slow down and be present to your love, encouragement and strength, and then act out of that so that what we do is done with love and no strings attached. We pray all this knowing your love for each person and everything on this earth is boundless and unceasing, and also knowing you are hearing us better than we are speaking. We offer these prayers in all the holy names of God. Amen.
As I reread the story of the Last Supper during the week and reflected on our theme of change this morning, I wondered whether the disciples had any concept at all of how much their lives were going to change over the next week. And I also wondered whether they realised how important their community was going to be to them as they came to terms with the changes that were to take place. Life is constantly moving and changing, whether we like it or not. And whilst we might welcome many of the changes we experience, there are also those changes, as Brian's talked about, that are challenging and disturb us. For us, as for the disciples, our community is incredibly important as we navigate the changes we face in life. This community of faith here can nurture, encourage, support, and hold us through all the changes we experience, if we're willing to embrace it. This communion meal that we share each week isn't a solitary experience. It's something that we do together, just as Jesus shared it with his community. As we take the bread and the cup this morning, there's going to be a piece of music played by Oliver Arnalds. And as we take the bread and the cup and listen to the music, let's just take this time to reflect on what Brian shared this morning, to maybe reflect on the changes that are happening for us right now, and maybe to reflect on what this community of faith means to us. And on the night he was betrayed, Jesus took the bread and the cup and he shared it with his disciples. And let's do that now too.
Okay. Has anybody got any announcements or things we should? Barb actually prompted me before. She goes, "You're doing notices, aren't you?"
She may not be making notices.
I could tell a joke.
I was starting to think about what we could do together as notices. So, to start with, I think our hearts and prayers need to go out to Jane Pallett and her team as she prepares the fundraising afternoon tea today. Then during the week, it'll turn into July. Now, there's a few things in July. I'd like to invite you to a barbecue on the 13th. We're having a barbecue lunch here.
Don't be fooled.
And when we're having this barbecue lunch, it'll be because we've got a hard junk day and we need to move things to the nature strip. So the more you help, the more lunch you get. On the 26th of July, there is a quiet day at Highfield Road. John Rogerson has all the information about that. And somewhere later on, I think in August, we've got a soup and toasted sandwich lunch. So between us through July, we've got a bit of a busy time of being together and celebrating what we can do in a variety of ways. I think that's all, unless somebody else has got something they want to say. Rosemary's standing up.
Joyce next week.
Joyce is speaking next week, yes. So she'll be currently with Jane at, and she'll be there this afternoon. And she is amazing. Some of the stories of how she's raised funds to pay for her ideas, and her ideas are just amazing. So yes, Joyce will be here to speak next week. I knew there was a reason we started with July during the week. So yes, it's a busy, July is a lovely focused time on everything, and those who are financially enthusiastic, it's the beginning of the financial year.
Buy up your pencils and pens if they're tax deductible. I thought I'd sit here like this because I'm a Brian wannabe. But I thought you'd all like the 30 or so photos I've got for our recent trip that I'm just about to run through. Don't laugh. Oh dear, it doesn't doesn't recognise me. Okay, thanks all. The participants have helped out. Brian, Julie, who we got? John, Judith, Carolyn, Bo in the booth, that's an alliteration, and Sarah for helping us pull together this morning. Yeah, give Bo a little clap because I would think that we'd be lost without him. And Bobby's not here, so Michael, would you like to lead us in the Irish blessing? Thank you. Oh, Dave. Is that...
Come in at the same time. May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine full upon your face. The rain falls soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of their hand. May God hold you in the palm of their hand.
Have a good week.